The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development. With a magazine and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives, at The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Hi, I'm Bernardo Moya from The Best You, and today I'm with Humphrey Walters. Hi, Humphrey, how are you?
Hi there, Bernardo.
Thanks for coming. Very nice to see you.
Great pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where do you live?
Well, I had an interesting upbringing. I was actually born in India, and then brought up in West Africa, educated in this country and in the States. And right now I live between London and Devon. I'm actually a country boy, really. With a name like Humphrey, which is a great name for a dog, as I'm always reminded by children. I've never taken myself too seriously, but I live between London and the countryside.
Tell me about your early years. I mean, what was that like?
Well, I was sent home from West Africa. My parents were doctors when I was 12, and the next time I saw my parents was when I was 20. So in those days, it's sort of wow. But what that developed in me, I guess, when I think back, is that the ability to integrate, because I had to stay with families. So I did whatever they did, and it taught me how to integrate, taught me self-sufficiency, all the things that I really value, and in fact have really made me what I am, I suspect, and it was very interesting. I had a very close relationship with my parents when they came back, and that was all fine. I never thought anything different till you have your own kids.
And how was school for you?
Well, I underachieved dramatically. I scraped through everything, and that's really, I guess, also a catalyst, was because I decided at one stage, first of all, people would say, you never make anything of your life. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs and people who've done things who can relate back to what I call a blast from the past. Somebody who said, and they say deep down in their soul, one day I'll prove that person wrong. And that was me. And then it wasn't until I got to university in Canada that I actually, I started to blossom, because like all of us, I had people who, for whatever reason, liked me and wanted to help me, and boy, did I grab onto their shirt tails. And that's also a huge lesson.
In school, were there any subjects in particular that you liked, you enjoyed? Or? Well,
I was good at languages because I was educated in Africa by a Swiss governess. So she taught me English on Mondays, French on Tuesdays, and German on Wednesdays. So this young kid I'm talking about the 50s, a long time ago, Bernardo, turned up in England speaking 3 languages. Couldn't believe it. I thought I was a genius, So languages were always, and particularly English and writing, and that's really what I've done most of my life, is what I developed.
And what did you study in university?
PPE, which was the easiest degree in the planet. And all us thickos who couldn't get into a university in this country went to Canada because they wanted to build up their numbers. And of course, they had a great entry system. If you could be capable of physically walking through the gates and sign your name, they'd have you. So that's my kind of educational establishment, and it was great. Fantastic.
And so after uni, what happened?
Well, then what happened is I got back, and I got a job with Newsweek writing, and they wanted somebody who could speak European languages to portray the American culture in Europe for the European editions. Because in those days, it was the Americans, as you probably remember, were overpaid, oversexed, overfed, and over here. So the attitude that this country in Europe had in particular, which was, de Gaulle-dominated Europe, and of course the Brits, was, we play the game of winning and all this competitive. That's kind of not what we are as a nation. And they wanted me to put over that actually it's not a bad thing to be good and to try and be excellent and do your personal best and be competitive, which of course is now absolutely critical. So I wrote about that, and I interviewed lots of people to say what was their attitude. So subliminally I was getting it over, and I did that for 4 years. And then I came back to London. I was living in Germany. And by accident, as you do, and by the advice and the guidance and encouragement of some senior people I met, I started a business.
And what business was that?
Well, it was a management training business, but it started, the way I started was I used to write company annual reports, because in those days it was a very drab legal document. And Marcus Seif, who was a huge, huge mentor to me, who was the last chairman of Marks & Spencer, said, I want to, most of my shareholders buy their underwear and socks in my stores. And they don't want a drab document. I'm paying the postage. Why don't we make it a marketing document, put some pictures and excite them about the business they not only use as a customer, but have shares in. Very, very progressive, because it was, now you're changing a legal document, imagine, into a sort of sales document. Anyway, that was a great success, and because nobody could read this stuff, and I was taught to write in very simple English. That's what you do when you write Newsweek or magazines like that. And then I got into boardrooms I did about 30 of the top companies in this country, and of course I'm rubbing shoulders with very, very successful people, and they're saying, Humphrey, you should start a business on this. Don't just be a hack writer. So my personal esteem, if you like, was actually quite low until somebody came along and said, come on, you've got something here which you didn't recognize yourself, which is often the case. You should capitalize on this stuff, and that's how the business started.
How did he become your mentor?
How did he?
Yeah.
Well, what happened was I was introduced to him as a hack writer. He just wanted somebody to write this thing, and then, of course, you build relationships, don't you? And I built a tremendous relationship with him, and then he asked me to teach some of his senior executives how to write, because he was a fantastic man, and ruthless simplicity was his obsession, and that's a lesson I've never forgotten. And so I just met him by chance, introduced to him, did the work, liked it, and it all went from there, as these things do, by referral, really.
And then you went into business. You got into business, and
correct, yeah, and that was in 1974, and. What happened was I had no money, and my ambition was actually to be able to sit in a room in midwinter. We're just talking about how cold it's been this last winter, and to be able to sit in a room, whatever size. I didn't have a huge ambition of a big house, and be able to pay the gas bill. And that was the second ambition I had, was not have a boss, and that's all. So it wasn't. I didn't have this sort of wonderful vision. I was going to be incredibly this, that, and the other. I was very, very modest. And that's what I've also realised. Just start with a modest step, and it's astonishing if you've got the drive. How things just develop, just astonishing. And that's what happened to me, basically.
And you had the business for how many years?
Well, I sold out in 1994, because I got to a level where I felt that the business had. I always remember de Gaulle. De Gaulle could have had a third as president of France. This amazing man, and he just didn't put himself up for re-election. The reason he said was because the country's run out of me, and I've run out of the country. And I never forgot that. Never overstay your welcome. And I thought, if de Gaulle was me, he would say, it's time you moved on. And that's what I did.
Oh.
94, yeah.
Which was a good 20 years, was it, approximately?
Yeah, it was 20 years, yeah. It was, yeah. And we built this business, with lots of very clever people, and a lot of friends I still have.
I'm curious, just to know,
sure.
You're a pilot. When did you decide to become a pilot? Was it in your early days?
Yeah, it was. I fly planes and helicopters. I've flown planes for about 40 years and helicopters for about 35. Well, I tell you why, very simple, because I was working all the time. I always dreamt of being a pilot, but I was turned down on eyesight. And so I thought, right, I'll go and learn. And as a sort of... instead of working all hours God gave you, which you do when you start a business, because it's your passion, so it's not a hardship, really. But I thought, come on now, go and develop an interest. And so that's where I learned to fly. And yes, I've flown ever since I fly. In fact, I'll be flying today. Down to my place in Devon. It sounds very poncy, but doesn't everybody?
That's absolutely brilliant. So when you sold your business out,
sure.
Obviously you had loads of questions, or you thought,
sure.
What do I want to do next? What was your plan then?
Well, my plan was to. I had been passionate about leadership and teamwork and all this stuff that everybody wrote about. But what I realised that most of the people who wrote about it had never really done it. And I'm not knocking that. That's great, because some great academics. But I decided I'm not an academic. I'm actually quite poor academically. So I decided for the rest of my career, I was going to, first of all, examine what do you do with leaders and teams when times are tough. And I knew the environment was getting tougher and more competitive. So that was my decision to focus on that. My prof at university told me that you can be an expert in anything in 2 years. And I didn't believe him, but I do now. So I decided... get out there, and I decided to find a case study that reflected everything I was interested in. What do you do in a tough time with teams and leaders? And that's when I volunteered to sail around the world the wrong way.
How old were you then?
Oh, God, now you're asking me. 50, I went in 96, so I was 55.
So you're not spring chicken when you decided to go into...
Well, I don't know. I feel quite spring chicken now.
Well, 50's the new 70s, they said.
Indeed, thank you.
Anyway, so
sure.
You got onto that.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating story. Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, I think this is the lesson for me, was you've got to have dreams. And my dream was to find an environment and be a practical example As a personal branding, make no mistake, it was a business decision as well as fun and as well as a learning exercise. And I decided I needed something, and I didn't know what. And then I was sitting in my house at 10:30 on a Sunday night, and out came at the television screen, came the opportunity to sail in a team, in a competitive environment, in the toughest yacht race in the world, 14 identical yachts. And I thought, I can't believe it. This is just the case study I need. But unfortunately, I never sailed in my life. So that was a bit of a detail. So that was a bit small, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If the passion is there. And in fact, 70% had never sailed, and they were picked on enthusiasm, because if you've got somebody with enthusiasm, you can teach them almost anything. Really becomes secondary, to be honest with you. So that's what I did. I couldn't believe it. And I took a year off, 11 months, and off I went.
Now, fascinating, the build-up of it. Tell me how it all starts, how it happens.
Well, what happens is I was picked in 95, and we went 94, and we went in 96, 97. So it was and you had to be trained. So and you sort of signed up for five-day slots from Plymouth out into what we call the Western Approaches. That's out into the Atlantic, you know. So I signed, and I suddenly found many things humbled me, but the first thing was how hard I found it to learn a new skill, because I'd been out of the habit of learning. And if anybody tells me that you mustn't keep learning, it's like salespeople say, I don't need to go on that sales training course because I've done it. And look at my results. They really aren't winners. You've got to keep yourself up to date. You imagine if you went to a doctor and you knew that doctor said, well, I qualified 25, 30 years ago. I don't need to keep up to date. And I'm going to just carve into your chest. You wouldn't be so happy with it. So I found it really hard to learn a new skill. So I now set myself every year 2 things of something new to learn. I'm just about to go on a typing course. I can type pretty well, but I don't do it correctly. So I'm going to relearn how to do that properly. For instance, I'm going to re-energize my German, for instance, by joining I was fluent. I've lost it because I haven't used it. I'm going to go back. So 2 things this year to challenge me.
But with the yacht, basically, what it was is there's a team of people, and they pick the people. Tell me about that process, because you build your own boats as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we had to put the thing together. Yeah, well, what happened was it was just first come, first serve, basically. Men and women, didn't matter who the hell you were. There was no psychometric testing, no nothing like that. If you had enthusiasm, you could do it. And then basically what then happened, after we were all trained, whilst they trained, they obviously observed us, but I'm not sure. I never got any feedback as to what I was like. And then we were summoned to the boat show I remember never forget it, January the 5th, on a Sunday, to be told what team we'd been. And they didn't do it they just did it by skills. So they needed a medic, they needed somebody who was probably engineering, and the rest men and women, they just split you up in the team, and that was it. And you got who you got. And if you didn't like them, you didn't go. And so suddenly I turned up. And I would look down this, and there was a list, and right, you go and meet your big skipper. There's 14 clumps of people.
There's 14 teams?
Yeah, 14 teams. I didn't know anybody. And I thought, as you do, you look at it, bloody hell, I'm going to spend a year living in a skip, which is what it was like with these people who I don't even know. So it was as a case study, imagine I was trying to study a worst case scenario, which of course gives you the best information. So it was a very, very harsh beginning, and that's so the skipper then got us together, and then the induction and the process of building the team started.
Each captain obviously had their own way of building a team.
Indeed.
Tell me the story of your team.
Yeah, well,
what was different?
Really, really interesting. Well, first of all, let's talk about the end result. We were the only crew in the history of long-distance yacht racing to come back with exactly the same people we left with. So our staff turnover in business was 0. On the race, it was 35%. And it all started, and that's really what I learned, is how are you going to get a team together? So you imagine there are 14 clumps of people, all from different walks, different nationalities, whatever.
For 14 skippers?
Yeah. 13 of them turned left and got straight into building the yacht and the technical the task. We didn't. My boss, trained by the Navy, that's why I'm such a fan of the men and women from our armed forces. We turned right, and he said, never mind that. We got 2 weeks to do that. It's not a problem. We're going to go in a house in the middle of Dartmoor, and the most important thing is for us to get to know each other. And that, set our culture. And that was really the most critical thing. So once we then went and built the yacht and did all that stuff, it was a demonstration of what we'd agreed, the way we were going to behave, what our culture was going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I found that fascinating because, as you said, like, you know, you had 0%
Yeah, it was, and we have a reunion every year. And I would have done, instinctively, the turn left and got into the yacht. Interesting, isn't it? So my instinct says we've got to get this thing going. And I see lots of CEOs doing that. And yet, my skipper, Paul Bennett, a wonderful guy, incredibly courageous, he'd been trained by the Navy. And, you know, in the Navy, it's who the hell have you got? Because you fight for your mates. Yeah. So you better know who you're shoulder to shoulder with.
It is said that we live in a world our questions create. And it's true. Those that have succeeded in life, those that stand out, those that have made a difference, those that are inventing, those that are exploring, pushing the boundaries of reality are based on those that have asked themselves empowering questions. In my new book, The Question, Find Your True Purpose, I help you find your true purpose, find your legacy. For more information, go to www.thequestion.co. If you're interested in working with me, contributing, speaking at any of our many events, partnering or licensing The Best You, for more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Tell me about the race as such, because obviously extreme endurance and...
Yeah, it was. I mean, the key of it, I mean, the first leg was a sort of shakedown. Went down to Rio, it was down the Atlantic, which was lovely, you know, and then, of course, it's all started. So the real race is all about the Southern Ocean. We were in that for about 7 months, and that is just the most amazing place. I mean, it's raw, brute force. The scale of the waves is huge. It's very cold. The wind is 60, 70, 80 knots. We went through a hurricane. And just to give you an idea, the eastern seaboard of the United States had a hurricane. Their maximum wind speed, I think they got to, was 90 miles an hour. We went through 140. So you're in stuff that, and you can imagine what that's like. And it's just...
You're not prepared for it.
No. We shouldn't be there, human beings, to be quite frank. I mean, we're 2,500 miles south of any shipping. So you've got no chance of being rescued. If you're on your own, baby. And that's it. The only other potential rescue is your other boats. And in fact, a yacht got dismasted, another busted its boom, and they were helped by other members of the race. So camaraderie is phenomenal.
How did the race end?
Well, for us,
yeah.
Well, we came 7th. The problem we had, we were by far the fastest boat. We actually got stuck in the hurricane. We were slightly a bit too far south. We didn't know. We had no satellite imagery or anything like that. So we went from about 3rd to last, and we caught up because these boats, I mean, we beat the yacht behind us coming across the Atlantic by 11 seconds. That's how close it is, because they're all exactly the same. So we did really, really well. Our personal performance was world class because we were by far and away the fastest. Otherwise, we'd have stayed last. And we didn't. We clawed our way back, you know. It's hard. It's very tough. 2 hours sleep, that's all you get at a time. You're wet all the time. But I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
Brilliant. Fascinating. You finished that? You learned plenty. What did you decide to do then?
Well...
You've run a few marathons as well.
I'm running the London Marathon this year, yeah. I've done 36, I think.
36?
Yeah. I've just been in Rome, so I beat the Pope. He was there too. He was going to have his inauguration on Tuesday, and I'm running in part of St. Paul's, whatever it is, on the Sunday in the marathon. What did I do then? I got back, wrote the book, which I'd been writing all the way along because obviously I knew the sooner we could get it out, the better. And then I'm kind of fiddling around thinking, what the hell am I going to do now with this stuff, and actually feeling really lost because I've no business any longer, no mates in a sense. And I got a phone call. I'd done a radio broadcast once a week from the yacht on 5 Live and Classic FM. Saying how it was. And I never missed a broadcast because it's incredibly important. I mean, you know this, that you meet a deadline. And Clive Woodward had listened to it. I didn't think anybody listened except my mum. And he said that I've just been appointed as the 6th choice to be the new coach for England, the rugby team. And you're an old get off a yacht. That was a phone call. But you're a business person and nobody can argue you don't understand about tough environments. Are you interested in helping me build a world-class team? And I thought, bloody hell, what do I know? And I said to him, I don't even have a tracksuit. And he said, you put a tracksuit on, you're out of here. So my job was the 90 hours before the 80 minutes of performance. And he said, if that's got to be world class and no excuses, everything's got to be the best. Otherwise, we're never going to perform. You know, you can't turn up to a shambles. So I just identified every single area of the journey from Monday night when the players turn up to Sunday morning when they leave with their partners often. You know, everything from meetings, food, how the training was run, etc., etc., etc. Just like if you go through a supermarket, it's a series of events, isn't it? And that's how I looked at it.
And it was an amazing journey, that one as well, wasn't it? I mean, you know,
yeah, it was
against all odds. And
yeah, well, I think that was the key thing, was the self-belief. I mean, you know, we're just big as strong and ugly as everybody else, but it was the self-belief that we could take on these guys and whoever, and that's really one of the major things that I did, and was to always examine things we did well before we examined things that did badly. Now, we went to, my first tour was called the Tour of Hell. Those are people who know about rugby. In other words, we didn't win a match. We started in Australia, that's right, and then we went through New Zealand and ended up in Cape Town, South Africa. Got kicked all over the place. And I said to the headlines were terrible, as you can imagine. Go home, don't bother coming back, you know, and all this stuff. And I said to the players, I got them together, and I said, look, these are the headlines. And I showed them, and I said, we're never getting headlines like this ever again. I promise you that. I don't know what we're going to do, but if we've got the resolve, they'll never write this stuff. And that was the start of the resolve. So instead of being a tour of hell, it was completely the opposite. We saw world class and what world class looked like, right? And we knew, therefore, we had to do better than what was world class. And we knew because we saw them, but they didn't see us. So we knew we had an element of taking them by surprise. And we built on that all the time.
So part of your job was to model excellence in a way?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, one of the first things that we did was I said we've got to have a cause. Now, businesses have mission statements, don't mean a thing. It had to be emotional. And the cause that I wrote was our duty was to inspire the nation. So that all the people who maybe don't like rugby, which is fine, I haven't got a problem. But nevertheless, when we win this thing, they'll tell us they remember where they were and who they were with when we won the World Cup. So I said that means that all our behaviours, all the work ethic, everything has got to say I'm participating in inspiring the nation. And it's no coincidence that Seb Coe for the Olympics, guess what, he pinched it and he said was to inspire a generation. And the second thing I said to them, it's a game of inches. And here again, if you take David Brailsford of the cycling, he calls it marginal gains. But actually, I called it a game of inches, which I'd learnt from somebody else. I love the metaphor, yeah. Yeah, and you know, because it's achievable, isn't it? You talk to a 15-year-old child who's worrying about A-levels, you just say, look, just do a little bit more tomorrow than you did today. You can read a book in the holidays, can't you? Another one? Yeah, well, crack that one. Don't worry about that, you'll be all right. But just think of the inches that you're going to bring to your own personal performance, and you add that lot together, you're going to be fine. And I think that's what I found. Winners don't do different things; they just do things differently. So they're not some miracle where they just understand to find out, you know, where are the inches that are going to apply to them creating world-class performance.
So it's a great success. Guys won the World Cup.
It was. Yeah. Yes, it was.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. It's a fairy tale. Well, I'll tell you about the game of inches. We won by 35 seconds in extra time. So don't ever tell me winning doesn't matter, because if it didn't, why'd you keep the score? But can you imagine the nightmare scenario of coming 36 hours back on a plane, having lost by 35 seconds in extra time? And I would never get another opportunity in my lifetime to do something for my country. Never. And I've got to live with that for the rest of my life and tell my grandchildren, well, we got to the final, but we didn't win it. You know, that's my worst nightmare. I know most of the Australian players very well. They'll live with that for the rest of their lives. Why did the Poms beat us? I love the Australians. I think their attitude, I love all the Southern Hemisphere. Their attitude is fantastic. But it's very, very nice to beat them. And they were very gracious, I have to say.
Yeah, no,
so I learnt a lot about graciousness and defeat too, which is interesting.
And that's been kind of your thing. You've obviously, you deal with excellence. You help teams, all sorts of teams, create winning leaders.
Yeah.
you've been involved in. You're still involved in football.
Yes,
Chelsea,
I am.
Yeah.
Well, I'm more involved. I know nothing about football, and I'm thinking, I've been at Chelsea. I love it. The guys are fantastic. And I think the thing is, the areas I've been in, motor racing, I did a land speed record with JCB, cricket, I'm with Surrey. I know a bit more about cricket. And most of these I know very little. I soon learn, don't get me wrong. But if you clutter yourself too much with the sport, then you're not going to see where the gaps are, where the inches are that they could do something about. So my job is to challenge, why the hell do you do this? Just like a non-exec director in a business, really. And I find I'm incredibly well received. Obviously you've got to get on with people, of course you have, but if you look at it and you analyse it, and I was trained as a journalist to try and analyse what the hell is this, you get lots of guff. Can I see a trend, a thread, examples? And that's what how my brain works, which is why I write books. And so I go in and it's a lot of fun. I've just been up to the FA, the St George's Park, this new place, and I'm going to be working with the Roy Hodgson, the England managers, with Stuart, who runs the under-21s and the youth team. I just got an email yesterday because this idiot is the name for a dog's going to come in, but I hopefully can bring some different perspectives and aspects and maybe a couple of things that they haven't thought of. Because believe you me, they are very, very hungry for ideas. And I think people don't realise that. Being a top business person or top of anything is hard grind. It's drudgery, a lot of it.
So with you helped the JCB win the speed record?
Well, land speed record, for a diesel engine car.
You've been working with Chelsea Football Club for how many years?
I think it's my 6th year.
6th year? Well, more than a lot of the managers you've seen a few.
Well, indeed. I think I'm on my 7th. It's quite interesting.
And obviously, you were involved in the judo team, are you?
I was, in Beijing, and the swimming team.
Yeah, and the swimming team as well.
Yeah. I've got a great shirt in my house. Brilliant. All signed by them.
Great success.
It was, it was a great success because you had young men and women who came from nowhere. Nobody knew who they were, and suddenly, just like this last Olympics, and to see these, particularly the lady rowers, some of whom I know, achieved to what extent. The knock-on effect of that excellence is just huge. And I love that. I love seeing, putting passion, putting everything into it. And they're so humble and so they don't realise the impact that this stuff happens. That's why these things matter.
So what is it? What makes a great leader?
Well, I think it's a huge question, isn't it? I think there's no question. All the great leaders, let me just say how they equip themselves to be great leaders. Probably that's the easiest question. Most of them have started with a desire to do something for other people. I think you've got to have that. It's not money. It's not that. Some of it's could be fame, but most people start with nothing. The second thing, they have an amazing ability to get people to like them, basically, and to follow them, And they do that, I think, by being true to their word and keeping their word. You can get away with it a couple of times, but long-term you can't. And I think the third and probably the most important thing is they know what the process is, and then they find people to help them and practice. They're not frightened to go out and ask other people. Just to give you one example, I can put in my career, every time I've done something better, I can put a name against it. It wasn't Humphrey Walters suddenly. It was somebody said Humphrey. And I thought, wow. And I have a copse of trees where I'll be this evening in my place down in Devon. And there are 35 trees. And I planted a tree for everybody who's helped me. And I keep planting them. Because I look at this thing and I think, you've got this wonderful place here, which I have, and I'm very proud of it. But it wouldn't be if you never forget those trees and what they represent, that somebody came along and said, hey, have you thought of this? You ought to be doing that. Sometimes a kick up the backside. And I think that's what great leaders are very, very good at being able to refer to people who gave them a bit of advice and help, which when they put it all together, they just have this ability to get people to follow them.
Part of what I discuss with all my guests is about, obviously, the educational system.
Sure.
And you obviously help and advise big corporations, organisations. these things, should they be taught at school? Can they be taught at school?
Well, I mean, I spent 30% of my time in education. I talk a lot of head teacher conferences. They are fantastic people. And they're for two reasons. And that all of us, when I ask business people to think about somebody who touched their life, they'll always have a teacher. Could be an uncle, an aunt, and a boss, but always a teacher. They have this ability. The second thing they talk about is they have a passion for children. When you talk to head teachers or teachers, they just say, is this good for the children, all the time? Now, we in business talk about customers, and they are important. And we do talk about loving our customers, if you like. The difference I always think is that we touch their wallet and the teacher touches their soul. And I think they're very, very different. So should they teach the techniques? Yes, of course they should. And I do talk a lot in schools. I don't think enough. Because I learnt when I was a child, because I had to live with families, I would watch the dad, who might have been a lawyer or a coffee broker or a teacher, how they operated. And I just thought, wow, one day maybe I can use some of these examples. So it's all about observance and taking ideas and saying, I can do that in my own way, but it's a great idea, or it isn't.
To find out about my latest projects, get a free coaching lesson, or download my book, go to www.bernardo-moya.com.
Well, that's the thing. The thing is, I think with the educational system is that, if you look at the world and how it's evolving and moving in such a short period of time, are they adapting quickly enough?
Absolutely. Well, I think the problem, what I fight for with the teaching profession, whenever I ask, is they're bogged down in paperwork and bureaucracy, and what they really want to do is to go and be with children. And if the leader is bogged down away from the core of what they're trying to do, right? When I ran a business, I made sure I knew what I was good at and I knew what I was bad at. And I wasn't frightened of that. And I get people to do what I was bad at because it was important to happen so I could focus on what I was good at. Now, head teachers are fantastic marketers, salespeople, but they're fantastic with children and they're fantastic at guiding and helping and coaching other children. So why do we take them away from that when you'll find that 40% of their time is trying to fill in forms and bureaucracy? Oh, no, I mean, it's just outrageous, really. And they are open-minded, and they do lots of stuff about trying to equip, because they just care about children, is to equip their children to be able to cope in the world that they're going to go into. And I just think that we've got to give them more encouragement. It burns me when I hear people saying, "Oh, well, it's an easy life. They've got long holidays." These people are working like crazy. They really are. So it's encouragement we need, and just to give them a position in society to say, you actually really, really matter.
This brings me to kind of my next question, and it's a massive generalisation. What is the problem with society? What do you think needs to change, in general?
Well, I don't think there is a hell of a lot wrong, to be honest with you. I think this country, you go abroad and see how this country is viewed. I mean, they think we're a most fantastic place. We have a fantastic... Of course, there's disagreements. Of course there are. I mean, we know all that. But I'll tell you what, I've lived in Germany, which was divided, for goodness sake. I've lived in Belgium, which is divided by language, in France and so on. I think the Olympic Games, quite apart from anything else, demonstrated what this country is all about. Sense of humour. Look at the Queen. For goodness sake, wasn't that wonderful? Iconic moment, right? We had a sense of humour. We could put on a show. Look at the games makers, the men and women, the volunteers. Look at the military who helped. People don't realise that when you come from overseas, I go to the States a lot, they just absolutely admire what we're all about as a nation. The fact that in a turbulent world where you are going to get disagreements and stuff, nevertheless, we're somehow or other a nation that has something that people really, really absolutely admire and they really, really envy. So let's knock ourselves here. Let's smooth out some of the stuff that we're good. But I think we're doing pretty damn well, frankly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And what do you think are the best assets that because kids come out of school, university, they struggle to find a job. What do you think the best assets are?
What, in terms of our young people?
Yeah.
Well, I think they've got I'll give you an example. I go to Chelsea. The 11-year-old kids there, they are so courteous. They're 11 years old, right? They come up and they say, "Hello, Humphrey, how are you?" And, I couldn't even, I'd be their great-grandfather, probably. But they understand, and I think all the children I meet, and I go to some rough schools, when you get to talking to them, they're great. I think what we've got to do is to somehow or other give them the opportunity, and that's really where I worry about the lack of jobs and lack of this. And I think apprenticeships are now having a cachet that's worth going for. I think there's an awful lot of people who do massive tasks in inner cities. I see some of the inner cities, Liverpool, Manchester, all being regenerated. So I think we always focus on the bad stuff, and that's the characteristic of the Brits. Please, let's focus on the good stuff. Because that's really where we're at. And that's really my philosophy in sport, is let's look at the stuff we've done really well, and then we'll look at the stuff we need to improve. But let's get people realising, we can do it well. Start from that point of view. And I think that's what we need to inject into this country, I think.
And what are those best assets? What do you think? If you come out, you finish, what would you recommend people to do, to learn?
Well, I've always said, I said that winners don't do different things, they do things differently. What I found is that they have a curiosity. What I would do is I would go and see people that you admire and talk to them. And that's what happened to me. It happened by accident. Then I suddenly realised this was about... and I think the other thing I would do is if I couldn't get a job in this country, I'd go abroad somewhere. I'd go and take a trip, go and learn about Europe. Go and learn a language. And do something, because it's something that's going to broaden your outlook. Go and work on a ship. Anything that gets you talking to people, doing something differently. So when you come back, you're interesting as a person. You've done a few things. I think if you sit at home moaning about the fact you haven't got a job, then you aren't going to get one as simple as that. Go and do something somewhere. Go to Australia and see the and find something to do. And be a bit adventurous. People like adventurous people, because adventurous people have enthusiasm, and that's what people look at.
Enthusiasm is obviously key in everything you want to do, as you said.
Yourself. For goodness sake, you've interviewed lots of people, and I guess you pick them on the fact that they're enthusiastic about what they do.
No, absolutely. And one of the key things I think you pointed out before, that life is a continual journey of learning and educating yourself. What's your recommendations regarding learning and what people should do? Because, as you said, if you're a salesperson and you don't renew your techniques, or if you're a doctor, you don't go. So what's your attitude towards learning?
Well, I think it's tried to say it continue. I didn't do it, by the way. I was so busy running a business. It's not until I was in a learning environment I realised how rubbish I was, which really said, "Come on, mate." I would pick what I think I'm good at. You see, what people say is, I'm rubbish at that, I've got to get good at it. I don't agree with that at all. I say, if you're rubbish at it, don't spend too much time worrying about it. What I would do is to pick up the things that you're strong at, and the things that maybe you're okay-ish, and pick a couple of those and say, I'm going to convert those adequacies, if you like, into strengths, and just figure out what you're really good at. And like my prof said, in 2 years you can be an expert. Just go out, find it. Nowadays it's so easy on the internet. Blimey. If you can't educate yourself, you're never going to make it, because it's all around you, this ability to learn and pick up stuff. So pick up things that you feel you're really strong at, pick up a couple that you think I want to be better at, and concentrate on those. They could maybe be as little as 3 things. Who cares?
And the thing is, as you said, it's never too late. So,
never.
You started in your mid-50s. I started a complete new journey in my late 30s. So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, there you go. You and I can relate absolutely, because you've realised, and sometimes it takes a nudge. Sometimes it takes a setback. People have been made redundant, and they sort of, oh, God, and I say, come on, maybe this is the very kick up the backside you need. And most of them who joined my business, nobody would join me. I had people who'd been made redundant. Their view was they were on the scrap heap. I said, come on. And, of course, they've all blossomed. Of course, the loyalty they have is massive.
Who inspires you now?
Well, I have a lot of people, very unusual people, really. I'm very keen on the military. There's a lot of head teachers that really inspire me. I do 20 days a year, which I do in education because I think it's important. I just give them the time, as it were. Sounds a bit arrogant, though, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's people who are the sort of unsung heroes, right, who don't get the recognition, but I just see them beavering away. I'll give you an example. In Kensington Church Street, there's a flower, in Kensington, there's a flower seller. He's been there for 30 years. he and his family, they're up at 4 a.m, going to get flowers from Covent Garden, and they every day they assemble this thing. It looks absolutely stunning, and they work like a dog. And I go and talk to them, how's it going? And they inspire me because they give me examples. I say, how come you work so damn hard? They probably don't make a lot of money. And they said to me very simply, because it matters. I want people to see my flower stall and say, my goodness me. And every time I go past on the bus, which I do, I look at them and I think, what an inspiration those people are. Nobody gave them a job. They just created a livelihood and a living for them. And a lot of young people do that. If you take, all these people who've done so well in the sort of IT sector, they just seen a gap. They thought, I'll go for it. They didn't think I'm going to be mega rich. That didn't drive them. It was just something that they wanted to do. And I don't think that recognises any age at all. I think, anybody can do that.
You've obviously read a lot. What are you reading now? What do you normally tend to read?
Well, I do read business books. I'm a very, very quick reader because I was taught to read very fast in the States. I mainly read biographies. I very rarely read novels. So a biography could be somebody writing a book about, Bounce, Matthew Syed, who I'm a great admirer of, wrote a book called Bounce, which was the mental attitude. You don't have to be a genius. He was a table tennis European champion, and he said, it's funny, isn't it? In my street there was a brilliant coach, and guess what? There were 4 incredible table tennis players in my street. How come? Well, it's because somebody saw a skill and enthusiasm. So I like reading some business books. I find them, 5 ideas and 200 pages. So I've written little books which you can put in your pocket and stuff like that. And biographies. I love history. I love people like de Gaulle. I love, of course, Margaret Thatcher. Really created an environment for me. I didn't agree with all the things, but she created an environment where I could say, I can have a crack at this.
There's a lot of discussion now about that. I know it's current now. What are your thoughts?
I think absolutely amazing, and I think anybody who could turn around a country to be so proud of what it was trying to do and revered by the outside world, which is what we forget. I thought it was remarkable what she did. I don't think anybody else could have done it at all. And that's really through history. I found people. De Gaulle did the same thing in France. We hated him. He blocked us. But the French people just thought this guy was the greatest thing because he stood up there, not to be popular, but to do stuff for his country.
With Maggie in particular, sure. I'm not interested in the politics, but
no.
She was fighting against such a strong established status quo in so many ways. I can't even imagine, how what she went through. And for her to not get that kind of, the credit that I think she's due,
sure,
because of what she did.
I think the staying power, despite all the odds, is really a quality that I don't know whether I'd ever. Well, I certainly don't think I could have the courage, and certainly wouldn't have had the vision. But it's the staying power. It's sticking to your guns, despite everybody. And I said to Clive, I remember Clive, we have got to stick to our guns. We're going to be okay, mate. And I learnt that going through a hurricane. My skipper said, we are going to make it. And what you need to do is focus on what you can control. Think about your job and how can you be better and look after each other. That's all he said to us. And I think that's an example, certainly for me. You take up what you take up from people. I took up a huge amount of positives and certainly some negatives. I was very sad about the minus, but I don't think it was Maggie. I think it was the people who duped these proud men and women to say, don't worry, you do what I say and you will win. That's who lost them their jobs.
No, I agree.
And I think that's a tragedy of these proud men,
I think my last 2 questions.
Sure.
Time, because time is... How do you manage time?
I'm an incredibly punctual guy. I'm almost an anorak about punctuality, and so that's I'm fanatical about. I'm never late for anything, which is why I was in a real hassle trying to come to you. I was just really worried. I'm running around the streets and all that stuff. Anyway, I just do. I don't know really. I do stuff. Don't forget, I'm very, very lucky because I'm doing what I really love and what I'm passionate about. And, whether I have to fit in training for a marathon, I write. Because it's I don't believe, you see, in work-life balance. I don't think that's right. I think it's work-leisure balance. So writing books is part of my leisure, which is work-related. Do you see what I'm getting at? And I think I'm pretty good. Certainly people tell me, they say you do a huge amount. Well, what they don't realise is it's not drudgery for me, it's passion. And you find time for passion.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And my last question, what would you like your legacy to be?
Oh, for goodness sake, I haven't even thought about that. I've got a few more years in me. I just suppose I really would love people to say there was a guy who never took himself too seriously. That's because I never have. When you've been called Humphrey all your life, you can't afford to. Right? So I think, and somebody who cared about listening and helping other people. I mean, I think lots of people would like that. But I think that's really what drives me, I suspect. I mean, I could give up working, I suppose, but it isn't work. And somebody phones me up and says, can you come and talk to us, a bunch of kids? I'll be on the next, jump in my car and I'll go, because it's a two-way street, don't get me wrong. I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. So I think that's, didn't take himself too seriously, and somebody who cared and tried to help other people, I think that's enough for me.
Sounds brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, and thank you very much for watching Inspiring People. Humphrey, thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks so much. Thanks.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.